In law, ownership is not about intention. It's about legal identity. You may intend to own a property, but unless that intention is expressed through a legally recognized somebody's name, the law does not acknowledge your ownership. This brings us to a critical question. Who can own a property? The law recognizes only legal personalities. These include natural persons, that is an identifiable human being, a real legally recognized name, or a company duly registered with Corporate Affairs Commission, a registered trustee. What is immediately clear is that the law does not recognize fictitious names or mere aliases as legal persons. A fictitious name is, in the eyes of the law, a non-entity. It has no legal existence. It cannot own land. It cannot enter into contracts. And it cannot sue or be sued. It is simply nothing. This position is reinforced under the Land Use Act, particularly Section 1, which vets all land in the governor to be held in trust for persons. The operative word here is persons, not imaginary identities or fabricated names. Beyond land law, property transactions are fundamentally contractual in nature, and under the law of contracts, only a legal person has the capacity to enter into a binding agreement. Where that capacity is absent, the transaction is defective already. This is where the risk becomes very real. Using a fictitious or false name in a property transaction does not just create technical issues. It completely undermines your ownership and exposes you to serious legal consequences. At best, the transaction will collapse. At worst, it could amount to representation or forgery, especially where there is intent to deceive, and you will go in for it. The courts in Nigeria have consistently held and emphasized the importance of strict compliance with legal requirements in every land transaction. In Savannah Bank against Agilo, the Supreme Court made it clear that transactions affecting land must comply strictly with law or risk being voided. Similarly, in Awojubabwe Light Industries Limited versus Chinukwe, the court reinforced that where a party lacks legal capacity, the entire transaction collapses. In practical terms, an unreal person or fictitious name is like placing something on nothing and expecting it to stand. It will definitely collapse. Further still, in Omumere's case, the court held that misrepresentation, particularly one that induces transaction, can render that transaction void or voidable. Let's bring this home with a simple scenario. You purchase a property in Abuja under the name Michael Johnson. That name is not legally linked to your real name. A couple of years later, you decide to sell the property. A prospective buyer conducts due diligence and discovers that the named owner cannot be verified. At this juncture, the transaction breaks down because, legally speaking, the owner does not exist. And you know that no serious buyer or investor will proceed in this state of uncertainty. More seriously, the use of a fictitious name becomes criminal where these elements are present. There is intention to deceive, there is use of false identity, and a misrepresentation that induces the transaction to take place in the first place. These are not mere minor issues. They go to the root of criminal liability. At this point, you might ask, why would anyone use a fictitious name in the first place? In many cases, it is linked to attempts to conceal true identity, sometimes for privacy purposes, but often is in connection with concealing the source of fund for that transaction, which raises the concern of money laundering. Now, a case at hand has to do with a popular Nigerian constitutional lawyer, Chief Mike Ozokome, SAN, a senior advocate of Nigeria. He happened to be a party to a land transaction that took place in UK, where Jeremiah Useni, a former army chief, in 1993, bought property, exactly November 1993, bought property in UK with the name Shani Tali. This name is not linked to him. It's not an alias, but a fictitious name for obvious reasons. He was in government. He didn't want the property to be traced to him. most likely because of the source of the fund. Recently, the SAN, Mike Ozokeme, purportedly prepared a power of attorney transferring the said property from the name of Shani Tali to him, Ozokeme, under the consideration that the property is meant for payment of his legal services. And the property tribunal in UK discovered that the said name never existed. And along the line, it became very, very glaring and clear that Jeremiah Useni bought the property with a fictitious name. Currently, the SAN and one of the sons of the late Jerry Useni are standing trial for conspiracy, forgery, and other sundry offenses. So these are some of the risks associated with buying property with a fictitious name, especially where there is intention to deceive, where there is misrepresentation, and the misrepresentation is or happens to be one of the inducements for entering into the transaction in the first place. And in this particular instance, I have narrated with respect to the SAN. The parties here knew very well that there is no Shani Tally anywhere. And a purported, in fact, I learned that ID card, national identity card, passports were all fabricated in the name of the said Tally Shani. That's why the federal government is currently prosecuting the Leonard Silk for these said offenses. So this is not what anybody should go into. In the course of this video, you will learn how to conceal your identity through a legally recognized structure without falling foul or without breaching the law, without having to risk being liable under any criminal law or without having to break any law. However, with the case at hand, there is reasonable ground to suspect that the source of the funding was what the parties here wanted to hide by all means, and that amounts to money laundering. Let's quickly go ahead, but I mentioned this here to highlight the point that buying a property with a fictitious name can actually render you liable criminally, like as we have seen in the case of Chief Mike Ozokeme. That's very unfortunate. We go ahead. As an investor, you are not advised to still go ahead and buy any property you discover that was registered with a fake name. And as a seller, don't knowingly sell a property and execute deed of conveyance in favor of a non-existent person. Otherwise, you will be held liable for conspiracy and or aiding and abetting, which is criminal. It is, however, important to stress that there are lawful ways to achieve privacy without having to break the law, if privacy is your problem. If you wish to use an alias, you do it properly. One way to use alias without having to break the law, in the deed of conveyance, you write it this way: Mr. John Doe, also known as JD. This way, the alias is associated with your real name, so there won't be any controversy at all. Anybody looking for John Doe knows that we are referring to JD. Anybody looking for JD knows that we are referring to what? John Doe, as the case may be. So whatever alias you go by, make sure that in brackets or when you write your real name, it will be followed by also known as. You now add your alias. If your goal is to conceal personal identity or structure ownership, then you need to incorporate a company through the Corporate Affairs Commission and acquire the property in the company's name. You can also use a properly structured trust with identifiable trustees to do that. These methods are fully recognized by law and they provide you with legal protection, clear and traceable ownership, and most importantly, gives you the right to enforce anything that has to do with your land. The bottom line is that you don't hide it under a fake name and expect ownership. In property law, identity is everything. Before you sign any property contract or document, take a step back and get it right. At encumberedproperties.com, we help you verify property titles, help you structure ownership properly to enable you avoid legal mistakes that could cost you your investment. You can also book a one-on-one consultation with me. The link is in the description to this video. And if you are serious about protecting your investments. Then get a copy of this book, 7 Steps to Acquiring a Clean Property Title. It is a practical checklist. It distills over 20 years of experience in investigating and prosecuting real estate frauds. Share this message so others can learn, and follow us so you never miss our real estate red alerts. I remain Madwe Kemure. I'm a chief superintendent of police. I'm a real estate lawyer, and by God's grace, the founder, Encumberedproperties.com. Encumberedproperties.com remains the only real estate frauds prevention platform. We love you and we care about the safety of your real estate investments. Thank you.